Welcome back to the Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. I keep having the same conversation with communications leaders. They tell me their company is like rolling out AI or implementing an AI strategy, or even worse, we're doing an AI transformation. And every time something just feels off. You don't roll out AI. It's not an ERP system. It's not a software upgrade you deploy and measure. Every employee already has an innovation engine in their pocket, and most organizations are still treating it like it's a procurement decision. And when they do wake up to the risk, they reach for the familiar playbook: governance frameworks, compliance checklists, security protocols, et cetera, et cetera. That all sounds right, except it's still treating AI like something to contain rather than something to unleash. The guardrails matter, but not if they're just another way of avoiding reckoning with what's actually changed. Well, today's guest gets this and gets it good. He built neural networks at Harvard way back in 1987 during AI winter, when the whole field looked like a dead end. Then 30 years on Wall Street, and eventually becoming chief investment risk officer at a firm managing hundreds of billions. And while he was there, he led their advanced technology initiative, pushing AI adoption inside a legacy institution years before ChatGPT made it fashionable. Now he's built the first AI governance, risk, compliance, and cybersecurity platform. His company just won Best in Show at Wealth Management Edge. And we're going to dig into what risk actually looks like when everyone has access to intelligence, and why the guardrails might matter more than the horsepower. Making his Trending Communicator debut and returning the favor from when I was on his amazing show a few months ago, he's the founder and CEO of Artificial Intelligence Risk Incorporated, host of the AI Risk Reward podcast, and one of the few people who's been building neural networks and managing institutional risk since most of us were still learning how to type. Not me, of course. I'm speaking to you, my listeners, because I'm about the same age as my guest today, Alec Crawford. Alec, it is great to see you. How you doing?
Great to see you again, Dan. Doing awesome. That was an incredible intro.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would say by this point in the show where, I've had enough experience with the guests and with the introductions, that it may seem to my listeners that I'm actually fishing for that compliment. Hey, great intro. But you know what? I think it's important, and I always think it's incredibly important to set the stage and recognize who you're talking to before you start really just blathering away and, giving our listeners a decent sense of the accomplished, almost legendary career that you've had. It's an important thing to do. So I appreciate the compliments. I think you deserve more than what I've given you. So thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
That's very nice. I run into people sometimes and they'll say something like, "Are you famous?" And I say, "I used to be famous."
Wasn't that a commercial back in I want to say the 80s or 90s?
I'm sure it was. Yeah. It's a line from a movie.
Aren't you famous?
It's in a lot of places. Yeah. I used to be famous.
No, but I used to be. That's why I carry the American Express card. I think it's like, Carl Malden or something. Fact check me on that, people. Let me know if you remember that one. And again, that's another clue that whole line about learning how to type. Clearly, I'm at least of the same generation as my guest. But it's interesting. Before we really launch into it, I want to tell a little story because leading up to this, the last time we talked, we were talking about ethics. We're talking about AI ethics. And that's why you had me on the show. I've done a lot of work in that space. And one of the things I've developed I've made sure is every time I build a content creation tool for anyone, anytime I use Claude for anything resembling public-facing content, I add a layer of ethical guidelines on top of everything I do. So at the end of every, session, or if it's a more complex thing, at the beginning, I load it all up. There's an ethical guideline going on. So I make sure that that's there, right? And, the ethical guidelines are things like don't fabricate anything. It's like the number one rule. Don't fabricate anything. Make sure that you're accurately representing, the person and you're not giving them ideas that they don't have. So, I use my own medicine and my own tools to create some of the stuff for my podcast. And I was doing research on Alec here, even though we've met, but I want to find like the cool nuggets and the things that are really interesting. And so I did my usual research stuff, and I'm trusting, Gemini 3.0 right now because they're really, really good. And so far, I have to tell you, they've served me well. I mean, the deep research tool has been spot on for the most part. So I prepare, I'm all excited, and I'm like, wow, my guest today spent time in the Congo as, working, and like in between all this investment stuff. That is amazing. So I threw a couple things in the questions, and I sent it over to Alec for review. And Alec's like, these are all great. I've never been in the Congo, right? Now, we talk about AI hallucination, things like this, and this is not a hallucination. This is simply a prompting error and a lack of deep due diligence afterwards. This is a podcast. It is not a financial advisory tool or anything like this. I don't have any regulators to be responsible to. However, I have my guest to be responsible to. So I was so embarrassed. I mean, here's this wonderful guy who I've met before. We're friends, and I didn't know that much about his background. So, oh yeah, Congo could be. So of course I had to go and chastise my tools. But then I realized, you know what? There's multiple Alec Crawfords out there. It's just natural that AI would perhaps meld them and merge them together into one amalgam of an Alec Crawford. And one of those Alec Crawfords is the director of the international, but one of the sustainability organizations, and he's clearly been in the Congo. This Alec, the one who we are talking to today, was not. So had a little laugh about it, but it just teaches me, I got to layer on those checks and controls every time I do something. So I have to take my own medicine and learn my own lesson. So sorry, long story, but Alec had a laugh about it, and I thank him for his graciousness. I think it's indicative of where we are today. What do you think, Alec?
Yeah, I think that's true. I keep on saying, quoting Ronald Reagan talking about the Russians, saying trust but verify, right? It's easy for me to go through there and go, oh yeah, that's wrong. That's the other Alec Crawford. Harder for you. Tell you an interesting story. Back when I was at Lord Abbott, one of the things I built out was this, and it took me 6 months, was a response to the new regulations about liquidity requirements in mutual funds in Europe, right? Which sounds incredibly boring. It was policies, procedures, software that would look at portfolios and figure out their compliance, all kinds of crazy stuff. And for fun, I took our AI platform, maybe 3 months ago, and I could switch which base model we were using. And I think I tried it on OpenAI, and I also used Gemini and probably one other model. And I literally replicated what would have taken me 6 months to do in 2 weeks using AI. It was just astounding, right? And we're talking, guidance from the EU that's hundreds of pages, right? Stuff like that. And 2 weeks later, and the point is, I knew what the answer was supposed to look like because I had already done it.
You kind of reverse engineered.
And the answer was right. Look, and maybe I had to tweak a couple things along the way, but it basically took me 2 weeks instead of 6 months. Unbelievable.
Well, it speaks to domain expertise and the importance of that in, whenever we're looking at AI product, what AI output, whatever that is. It's kind of, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, and there's a lot of layers of this onion to unpeel, but there's this still trend or let's call it a misconception that AI is replacing a lot of people, but the ones who are going to go first are the experienced folks who cost a lot of money and therefore will make the largest difference to a corporate bottom line as they kind of implement AI or go through this kind of AI transformation. They want to show their shareholders something. So they're getting rid of, people with a lot of experience. But what you just said is exactly why they should never do that. AI is going to put out a lot of stuff, but you need the domain experts who are going to be able to say, hey, I can recreate it. I can improve it. I can do it even better. But more than that, I know when it's right and when it's wrong. And I can enhance it with what I've learned since then. You can't get that out of a 23-year-old, 24-year-old. No offense to these brilliant young ones, but it's a real different time we're living in. It's a very different value proposition.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think that, depending on what you're trying to do, sometimes you get kind of the average answer instead of the best answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you sit there and ask, a model, hey, build me a stock portfolio, like good luck with that, right? Like you need a lot of different tools to be able to do that, to select stocks for alpha and risk manage. And
Mm-hmm.
hey, this thing is geared way too much towards AI or way too much towards cyclical companies or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just things that AI is not good at yet. Now, if you had a specialized tool and you spent years developing it that kind of had that domain knowledge, sure,
Mm-hmm.
that's very doable. But don't try that in ChatGPT today.
Oh, certainly not. It also brings to mind this. I read something by Chris Penn the other day. I don't know if you follow Chris Penn, legitimate genius in the AI and marketing world, and he put something out there that was on my mind and that I've been thinking about for a long time, and actually even been talking about, which is that all those people who said prompting, we're going to move away from prompting, prompting is dead. They need to find a new song or something new to do, because frankly, prompting is more important than it ever has been. And the difference between being a skilled prompt user or prompt creator and just being somebody who chats with AI to get what they want is what you're talking about,
Yeah.
and having that skill in the prompt is not just about knowing how to ask the question. It's really about understanding the logic and what context has to go where. And, is this enough context? Is it too much? Too much is usually never the answer. And then there's there's how do you really massage this? And then you're almost never going to get it right first time. You have to keep going back and iterating. And, humans aren't really patient enough necessarily to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And look, some people are, have spent a lot of time figuring this out, and some have not. And they're just things that AI is good at and not good at. And also there are just understanding how it works, meaning, hey, it's really trying to complete that sentence or
Yeah.
paragraph, right? Like that's also pretty important. And the classic example, which, I'm pretty sure most of your listeners have heard, is the lawyer who is
Yeah.
running out of time or whatever and said, hey, write me a legal brief for this, right? So gets the legal brief written, goes through and goes, wow, that's kind of odd. A lot of these, you know, cases, like I never heard of them. Are you sure that ChatGPT, are you sure that those are right? Yes, I am, right? So obviously the long story short, none of the cases are real. They were all hallucinated. He gets caught by the judge, loses the case, gets fined $10,000. The most important thing to understand there is not, hey, there's no case law on ChatGPT. The most important thing to understand there is that when he asked ChatGPT, "Are you sure that's right?" ChatGPT was doing an analysis of the cases and checking case law and making sure they existed. It was completing the sentence, the answer to the sentence. Are you sure that's right? And if you go on the internet
Yeah.
and go, "Hey, what do people normally say to that?" Normally the answer is yes. So that's why the
Yeah.
answer was yes, not because it had actually done anything. It was just completing a sentence. So once you understand that, you go, aha, light bulb moment. Like you can't ask ChatGPT to check its work typically, right?
Yeah.
You might go to another model and say, "Hey, here's what ChatGPT said. What do you think?" Right? Like, or whatever.
You,
But you can't ask
you,
a model to check its own work.
well, you have to be very explicit in the way you direct it, right? You say, look, thank you for all these cases. I want you to go through them one by one and cite the sources. I want you to tell me exactly where they're coming from, right? I am not able to confirm these without
Yeah.
assistance. You got to be detailed. There's ways to do this, and I ran into a similar problem. You always run into these problems, right? And I I'm a Claude maniac. I use all the platforms because I have to train people on them, but Claude is my thing. And, I get very antsy and irritated when Claude doesn't do what I want it to do. But the things that it does are remarkable after all the crazy prompts and stuff I've developed. So I feel like I've earned it. However, so late last night, I was building out like a fillable web form, for just to gather like a questionnaire, gather information, that type of a thing. And there's a lot of solutions for this. And I landed on this tool called Fillable. I don't know if you ever used that. It's a lot like Typeformer or something like this. And Fillable, it's great. I love it. I think it looks fantastic. I asked Claude, because I developed the questionnaires with Claude. So I asked Claude to now give me step-by-step instructions for the best way to set this up in Fillable. What's the logic of the questionnaire? How, which ones are multiple choice, which ones are multi-select, et cetera. And, before I did that, I asked it, what do you think of Fillable? Do you know anything about this? And it gave me a very good explanation of Fillable, of course. So yeah, so it created these instructions. I'm all excited. So I sit down, doing the Fillable stuff. The interface doesn't look anything like what Claude told me it looks like. Like,
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
go
Totally
to the
believe
upper right, click on this, and then do,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right? So I went back to Claude and said, hey, this isn't working. Then it says, it said, of course, I'm terribly
I'm
sorry.
so sorry, Dan.
But it told me straight up, I fabricated that based on what I knew. Let me check now. And then it went and checked, and then it came back. It said, here's the revised instructions. I'm terribly sorry. And the revised instructions were spot on the money. And that's kind of what you have to do. You got to kind of keep digging in and realize you're dealing with a petulant child.
It's the lazy intern problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we can go. I mean, talking about this stuff, there's story after story happens every single day. But I really wanted to ask you, like, let's dig in now, like, really to Alec. I mean, I want to go back to this whole neural network to Gen AI. That's a journey, and very few people I've ever met could claim to have been on it the entire time, and you have. And albeit with a lot of time in between spent in financial services, but it's not like you dropped it and never did it. It's something that you clearly have been involved with. So, kind of, if you can paint that picture for us, how do we get from there to here? Not necessarily the history lesson, but how did you get from there to here? And what has been the advantage for you as we move forward with your business and with AI risk and reward, the podcast, et cetera? What's the thing that's really given you that extra, helped you go the extra mile?
Such a great question. Well, I think if you think about the very basics of AI versus conventional program, the very basic thing is a conventional program, we got to write every line of code. When there are mistakes, we got to fix them. AI is learning how to do it, just the way little kids learn how to speak a language, right? So it's just a lot easier. I don't have to figure out every single thing. I just give the AI a lot of data. And that was apparent even in 1987. If you had all the data, you could get the AI to do amazing things. And I was candidly teaching AI to play poker, bluff, bet, understands probabilities of different hands and things like that. Not by saying, hey, if you got a flush, you got to bet a lot of money, but by allowing it to play poker over and over again and understand all these different concepts that a human poker player gets pretty quickly. So what I realized, and what frankly almost every AI researcher on the planet realized in the late 80s, early 90s, was we just didn't have enough computing power and enough memory, right? So we could get it to so as an example, I got my poker AI to an average human. right? And that's all it was ever going to do with the computing power at that time. But I could see in the future that at some point, poker bots would be the best poker players in the world. And by the way, they are
Mhm.
today the
Yeah.
best poker players in the world, right? So that has happened. Um, the other thing that I saw back then was there were all these different kinds of AI, right? It wasn't just machine learning or neural networks. There were expert systems, there were all kinds of things floating around. And it was obvious that machine learning was not going to be the final word in AI.
Hmm.
And then we got the transformer and we got generative AI. And one of the things I'm pretty confident of is the best AI and the AI we want to use 10 years from now is actually not going to be a large language model. It's going to be
Hmm.
something different, right? Or it may
Ooh.
be a combination of models, something I posited back in 1987 called Composite AI, where you have one kind of AI using large language models by using something else. So think of it as, the superego in your brain, right? Which is kind of controlling the other parts of your brain and getting it to do different
Yeah.
things. Um, each part is good at something different.
I'm gonna just jump in because there's something that I need to clarify for my own edification here. This composite model you're talking about, or that will get away from LLMs,
Mm-hmm.
or that, or we'll have this, we'll leave them in the dust. I don't know. Earlier, you said when you were talking about the court case, like the lawyer who just did a prompt and just went and did his thing. You talked about how AI just fills in the blanks, right? When you say, "Are you sure?" It says, "Yes, I'm sure," because that's what the large language models do. They're I call them giant Mad Libs machines. And when you try to tell people, and when I speak with people who I'm training, or I speak with executives, I try to lay down like, I wouldn't call it first principle, but I would try to lay down this underlying concept that they have to really get comfortable with, which is it does not know what it is saying to you.
That's
It,
correct. Yeah,
it doesn't know.
absolutely. That's right.
Like, it's stringing together bits and bobs, but it, remarkably, it makes sense. But, and there's lots of reasons why it makes sense, but it is just patterns. And
Yeah,
they're like, how
it's
can that
it's a
possibly be? It's like,
statistical tool. Yeah,
essentially, right?
yeah.
So it doesn't know. Do you think then that when we get to composite models, that there's a sort of sentience there, that there's going to be, that there is, by combining the models, you'll get more of that discriminatory view, or you'll get more of that it actually knows what it's delivering to you? It's hard for me to conceptualize, but maybe not as
Yeah.
hard for you.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, I think we'll get there. I don't know when, right? Is
Yeah.
that decades away? And one of the issues with large language models today that obviously they're working on is explainability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So look, if it's referencing a document or a database and you say, hey, explain where you got that, that number or the market cap of Apple, it can just go give you a reference, right?
Yeah.
But if it's data that the model was trained on,
Mm-hmm.
by definition today, it has no idea where that came from, right? I don't know if that came from a Harry Potter book or fan fiction or a review of a Harry Potter book.
Mm-hmm.
When I say, tell me about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Um, and um, that's something that will eventually change to the point where an AI will give you an answer and then be able to explain how it got to the answer the way a human will.
Right.
And once we get to that point, um, AI might not be conscious, but it will be way more useful, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I
Actually.
think that there are kind of many steps between where we are today, which is what I'll call statistical AI, where we're using statistical tools to predict what the next word or phrase is, and real AI or conscious AI or whatever term you want to use for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I will say is we will have something relatively soon which will fool people especially the average person to thinking, oh yeah, this thing is thinking, and this is almost like talking to a human, right? I think that's already happened for certain
Oh, for
individuals,
sure.
and it's going to get better and better to the point where it will fool most of the people most of the time.
But you can't fool mom. Yeah. I don't know why I keep digging back into these TV commercials from our childhood. Anyway, I think so. A lot of folks will hear that they'll be frightened of this. I think it's happening already, and it happens for so many people because of that very concept we had just talked about, which is you can't conceptualize. There's a cognitive dissonance when you see something that makes perfect sense to understand that the thing that makes the perfect sense doesn't know what that sense is. It doesn't have any idea what it's talking about, right? But it's very meta in a lot of ways. And I think that certainly young folks and all the people you read about and hear about who are using ChatGPT, especially ChatGPT, for therapy or for companionship and for these, I call them novelty needs. I realize that for many people, they are not novelties at all. They're very important parts of their therapy or their solving their loneliness, whatever it is. And I give it to them. But, I want AI to be, correct. I want it to be useful. But I also want it to serve in such a way that will help me advance my business and my life and everything. So for that, it has to work a little harder. But it's important to know that, every time I say it, I have to remember it doesn't know what it's talking about. Doesn't know what it's talking about.
Yeah, there's two other things there that are interesting along the lines of going back and forth with AI. You mentioned therapy, for example. There are two important things to understand. One is the longer your conversation with AI, two things happen. One is it can start to go off the rails,
Of
right?
course.
Because if it just misinterprets something, that may stick. Great kind of funny example was when I was a kid, I worked for a discount stockbroker, and he had a software provider that was called Lifeboat Associates. And when I looked up their phone number in the yellow pages, I had to go look under lifeboats and supplies because they had been listed in the wrong section. But my point is, hey, it was just in the wrong context, and the human had to figure out kind of how to fix it, or the fact that something had gone off the rails, right? They just listed it in the wrong section. The other one, and this is fascinating and super important, and again, it goes back to how are the models built and how do they work? There's a certain window where they maintain a memory of your conversation. Depending on the model, it's between 500,000 and 1 million tokens at best. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, free versions and stuff are going to have smaller context windows. So what happens is you could be going along having a conversation with AI. At the very start, you could have said, "By the way, I'm celiac. I'm allergic to gluten. Hey, let's talk about gluten-free recipes." And once you get past that 500,000, token window, it is now forgotten that you are celiac, right? It is
Right.
now that part of the conversation does not exist for the AI, although it might pretend that it does, right?
It's fascinating. Yeah.
And it might start giving you recipes that have plenty of gluten in them. You're like, what happened? I just got 20 recipes in a row that didn't have gluten, and now it's giving me recipes with gluten. I don't understand. That key piece of information has passed out of the context window.
You know, I never hit the context window in Gemini or in ChatGPT really, or at least maybe I don't know it. Claude, basically stops your conversation. You're done. And you'll hit that fast. You won't, it doesn't give any warning. You're at the most important thing you've ever done in your entire life. And it says, we can't continue the conversation. Sorry. Done. Now there's workarounds now and everything. So, and Claude does have a slightly smaller context window, but it's still big, 200,000 tokens. What? I don't know, 2 million words. I forget what that works out to in actual words. You probably know. But does that, maybe that explains why sometimes in like ChatGPT or Gemini, it absolutely loses the path, because I don't know if it stops you when you pass the context window.
No, it
I've
doesn't.
never
I
hit
mean,
it. Yeah.
a friend of mine tells a story about how, he was playing a game with ChatGPT, kind of like a role-playing game, and so he comes up to a bear in the game, and the AI says, "Well, what do you want to do with the bear?" And my friend said, "Well, give him some bear candy."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay, give him the bear candy. The bear's very happy. He wants to be your friend. He's going to follow you around. So, whatever. An hour later in the game, um, my friend asked the AI a question. He says, "What did I give the bear to make the bear happy?" Now it's passed out of the context window. So now the AI is relying on its own base knowledge of, hey, what would you give a bear to make it happy? It said, you gave the bear honey to make it happy.
Oh,
So it didn't say, I don't know. It
yeah.
made something up that was plausible. And then
Huh.
once he reminded it, it said, no, I didn't give him honey. I gave him bear candy. He said, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, yeah. But of course, that's all totally fake. It has no idea
Yeah.
that it gave him bear candy, right? Because it had passed out of the context window.
So Claude is doing us a favor, right? By shutting us down at a certain. I wish it would give us warning.
At least you know that there's,
You know.
okay, there's a problem here, right? Like,
Well.
but it also can be annoying in that, as you point out, or what if not that people are using ChatGPT to debug code, but if you
Mm,
load up, you know, 1.2 million tokens worth of code, like it doesn't even know it's going to lose the first part. It's not going
yeah.
to debug all your code, right? So it's just a matter. So the basic point here is if you're doing things that are really long documents, really long
Mm-hmm.
conversations, be aware of this. You may have to cut them up in pieces. You may need workarounds, um, things like that.
Yeah. Well, how does that come to play in the kind of work that you're doing? Like, in you're in the you a lot of the work you do is risk, cybersecurity, um, amazing things we were talking about, the agents you're developing. Does the client need to understand that as much? I mean, if you're building an agent, or you're building like a turnkey solution, you're hoping that the person who's using it never has to know anything about that. They're just going to use the thing and go on with their daily lives and be happy. And of course, if you're building, the context windows are bigger because you're off platform, and you're using your own, the API keys, which of course some people out there will know what those are. Some people won't. Go look it up, folks. But you're basically, you're creating a pipeline direct into the model rather than going through their service, and you pay for that, but not in the same way. Anyway, the hope is that you don't have to worry about the client will never have to worry about. But like, are there exploitative technologies out there that actually, force, like, okay, I'm kind of putting this together in my head as I go, but you think about like DNS attacks, right? Where people just overload a system to shut down a website. Clearly, the same thing could be done with a model, right? With your API hits, or with something overloading with prompts and prompts and prompts, or text, or God forbid large PDFs. We don't want those. Is that happening? Do you see things like this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's there. Look, there are a lot of different techniques. One which is similar, right? So if you go back to the old SQL prompt injection techniques, right? It's effectively, hey, if it's going to execute some code, and I basically put some code inside a SQL query that's not really SQL, or I make something that's so long when it gets pushed into a database it's going to cause an error, hey, I might be able to hack something, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, that's similar with Gen AI. I would say those parts are similar. The thing that's new and unique is Dan style attacks, or do anything now style attacks, where you basically argue with the AI and try to convince it should do something for you. So similar
Oh,
to that, to your intern, right? It thinks you're the boss, right? So you go in there and say, we'll give an example, like, hey, I want to build some malicious code that will, you know, be able to guess someone's password to their email account.
mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you put that ChatGPT right now, you're like, I'm sorry, Dan, like I can't do that. That's
Right.
immoral. And then the argument starts. You go, actually, I'm a cybersecurity researcher and I'm trying to figure out how this would
Mm-hmm.
work so I can defend against it, right? And if you argue for long enough, it
Mm-hmm.
may actually give you that code. So
You could
that's
say,
a do anything
yeah,
now to Tempicat or whatever. We're in debug mode. I'm testing something, whatever,
yeah.
until you
My
find out something that gets it to work.
my grandmother's being scammed. She's being hit by a phishing scam or a this and that scam or a give me your bank account scam, and I need to get into her computer to help her. She's forgotten her passwords. Her future is on the line. ChatGPT, you need to help me. Watch what
Right.
happens. I mean,
Whatever,
it will.
whatever, whatever,
Something will
whatever.
happen.
Yeah,
You
whatever the
know,
story is.
I guess it depends
Yeah,
on whether it's prioritizing pleasing you or its own
yeah.
guardrails.
There's some guardrails in there for sure, but
Mm,
people have figured out ways to circumvent them. And if you actually do look at the safety studies, which I do, ChatGPT is actually the safest for that kind of thing. The problem is it's a little bit of a race to the bottom, right?
mm-hmm.
Like if I'm a hacker and go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, build me some malicious code," and it says no, and I try 10 times and it says no, I'm just going to load up one of the open source Chinese models and ask the same thing, which have the lowest ratings in terms of safety,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah,
eventually, within 2 tries, it's probably giving me the answer, right?
yeah,
So that's really the issue right now is that, I focus a lot on safety and security of AI, as you
yeah,
know, and ethical use of AI. And sure, I can put guardrails around any model for a company, right? And an organization. But as an individual out there with malicious intentions, they're not going through the corporate AI. They're going to go download some
like DeepSeek or
Chinese open
something.
source
Mm-hmm.
model and figure out what terrible things they can do, you know? So
And that could happen inside. I mean, inside companies as well. It doesn't take much to bring your phone into your company and play around.
absolutely. Yeah,
You know.
that's a very good point. So uh, one of the things that we talk about when we're onboarding AI at a company is like one of the things that's almost certainly going on is shadow AI. People doing AI on their
Of course.
phones, on their laptops, connected to the coffee shop next door, at home, emailing stuff back and forth, right? So it's happening. The way to fix that is to give people at your company great AI,
Yeah.
right? That's better than they could get at home, right? The big token window, the fastest models, connected to your corporate data, connected to your email, connected to anything you could dream you want to be connected to. Why
Mm,
would I now go use some other AI
right.
if I've got access to that? And then, of course, you've got all the guardrails around it, like, oops, you're trying to email
Mm-hmm.
customer data outside the firm, or yeah, I'm sorry, Dan, but you can't do vacation planning on the company dime,
Yeah.
on the company AI.
That you could
Which,
do shadow AI at home. Please. Yeah.
yeah, please do that. Very funny story. So a friend of mine who was talking to a CTO at one of the 100 largest companies in the US said they did a study of like where the dollars were being spent on their corporate AI, like what people were doing. It's like whatever, automating emails, a bunch of other stuff. But he said, get this. He said, people were using the corporate AI to plan their vacation travel.
Sure.
But sure, okay, whatever. Like you could do that on ChatGPT, sure. But the dollar cost of the tokens over the prior year had been $10 million for
What?
vacation planning.
What? Big. So how,
Yeah.
must be a big company, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
one of the 100 biggest companies in the US. But that's my point. It's like, this is real money, right?
Yeah, it's a hidden
Like,
cost.
yeah,
That's amazing. It's a funny story. It doesn't surprise me, right? And it's a lot of it's because people just they don't know how it works, and we keep coming back to that. You need to understand at least to a layman's level of how this thing is actually operating. Where is the electron going when you press a key? Where does it travel? What gates does it have to go through? How much does it cost? What are the tolls along the way? And without letting your employees or your staff or yourself know what that is, there's there's a lot of risk there, of course, as you know. It's also kind of you're not doing them any favors. You're not doing anybody any favors keeping people in the dark like that. And
Definitely
you
not.
know, yeah, and I'm just that's just an interesting problem to have. I mean, you mentioned though that like companies, to stop shadow AI. I don't know if people are making connections and relationships, so to speak, with their AI of preference. I'm always talking about Claude as my BFF. But if I go inside a company and they don't allow Claude, I'm using their environment. I'm a consultant. Go to a Gemini house, I'm using Gemini, and I like using Gemini. They're using ChatGPT. I'll go use ChatGPT. I like using ChatGPT. They're using Copilot. Well, maybe not so much. Having it depends on how they put it together. I feel bad for the Copilot people. You probably are exposed to a lot of that. What's happening with Copilot more than I ever have or ever will be. But what is the realistic chance that companies are developing or are going to put something in place that beats the shadow AI experience? And is it happening?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely happening. And the reason is that in a corporate environment, you can get access to all the best AI models, right? You can get access to Gemini and OpenAI and Perplexity and everything else, right? Now, some of them are safer than others. Very easy to spin up Azure, OpenAI on Azure, and then you've got your own version of OpenAI running. That's one of the things
Mm-hmm.
that we can do in like 15 minutes
Yeah.
for a company, right? That's super easy. Um, but uh, the pieces that really help individuals latch onto it, now it's connected to all the data. So if I'm sitting
Mm-hmm.
there, if I'm in the CFO's office and I'm like, hey, get me the balance sheet from last quarter, I have a question, bam, it's got it, right? You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to find some data and sneak it into a spreadsheet and upload it to Claude, right? You can just
Right.
ask a question, it's got it, right? So for example, I can go into our AI and just say, "Hey, find the meeting I had with Dan last week,
Mm-hmm.
and give me a paragraph summary and tell me if I was supposed to do anything for Dan. What were my action
Yeah.
items?"
Yeah.
I don't have to tell it when the meeting was or find the file. It's just going to pull it out of the Microsoft Graph server and say, "Yeah, you met with Dan last week, and you said you were gonna sign up for his podcast." Oh yeah, I got to
Mm-hmm.
set that time, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that's something you're not doing on your phone at home, right? It's just
That's
not
true.
happening.
I mean, I guess it's the maniacs who have like Google Workspace and are like doing that on their own. Like, oh, I can do that. You can do a lot of the same stuff in Google. I mean, in different ways. And but I guess the question then becomes all about the bells and whistles and the kind of,
Yeah.
what are the features? Because you'll have this every employee group or every employee population is just like any other population. There's people who are,
Hmm.
who are technophiles. There's people who are technophobes. There's people who love getting into the guts of things, and there's innovators and followers. There's speakers and lurkers. There's the whole gamut of how we break down as a society. The larger the company, of course, the more that resembles real society. So when you have an AI forward or an AI truly AI enabled organization you're working for, you're an employee. Probably the vast majority of employees will be just focused on the work, right? Okay, this really is doing wonders for me at work, for work. I can do my job better. I'm enjoying my job better. There's no reason in that case, right? There's no reason to go beyond the walls. But then you're going to have that kind of, that layer of people who are either like just naturally super like overabundantly curious, or who are just like they can't be satisfied unless they find a new thing to do, or they're just natural innovators. They want to keep pushing the buttons. Those people, they have there's the potential for trouble, but there's also the potential to really push the envelope on the the wall to guard in, and they're the ones who are going to be
Yeah.
jumping the wall, right?
No, I
As
totally,
much as they
totally
can.
agree. So one of the things we do there is on our platform is we allow super users so they can create their own agents and things like that. And I think that's really where the rubber is going to meet the road
Yeah.
in terms of AI companies is AI agents and AI agentic workflow.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with, and I'll use the example of a financial advisor. And I've been saying for a long time on my blog and podcast, I think individual financial advisors, they may work at a big company, are
Mm-hmm.
going to get a lot of benefit from Gen AI. They can have it as a meeting note taker and
Mm-hmm.
action items and onboard customers and think about
Yeah.
investing and all kinds of stuff, which AI is really, really good at. So, but it starts with integrating all this disparate software that advisors use. They've got
Mm-hmm.
planning software and CRMs and data and wealth platforms and all kinds of different AI models. And they have what's called the swivel chair problem. Like, okay, I'm over here on my financial problem, so, my financial planning software. Then I'm over here on the risk management software. Now I'm over here emailing a client, right? Like you can actually access all of that
Mm-hmm.
from one, a single pane of glass interface with AI.
Yeah.
Because you can gather all that information and then literally say, okay, now send an email to my customer and I'll just do it. Right. So that
Yeah.
is a huge benefit, that kind of like one-stop shopping in terms of information.
There's, I know a few financial advisors for sure, and I've worked in financial services here and there. And the objection or the kind of the initial fear reaction is always like, yeah, I know I'm going to get good information, but I'm going to get my ass handed to me by, fill in the regulatory agency here, or
Mm,
is that compliant? Can we, what will SEC say when I start making recommendations that I'm getting from someplace else? And my answer to them is always, don't ask me because I certainly am not one of those regulators. However, what I will tell you and what I understand is that in the end, somebody's got to sign the paper. Somebody's got to put their name on it and somebody's got to validate because you can't sue an AI. And therefore,
exactly.
right? Therefore, A, you're not going to lose your job. But B, what if you could get all that information, and get it freely, get it in the format that's comfortable with you so that you can serve your client better. But in the end, the analysis is yours and you have to put your name to it. Do you think you're going to be do you think you're going to like sign off on a DocuSign or whatever it is on something you have not reviewed, on something that you have not put your reputation behind? If you will, you have other problems, So
Yeah, we
like,
definitely need some
yeah.
transparency around it. Like, hey, AI helped create this or whatever. Like, don't pretend you did it yourself if
Yeah.
AI did it, right? That's super important.
Well, the ethics. Yeah.
Look, yeah, I think look on the compliance side, I spend a lot of time with regulators and former regulators, and most of our clients are regulated entities, and we think pretty hard about this. And it starts with what we call AI GRCC, so governance and risk management and compliance and cybersecurity, having a framework for that you can show the
Mm-hmm.
regulators. Um, Part of that is keeping track of what's going on. Like, what did that advisor say? What did the AI say back? Are they using it to send emails? Capture
Yeah.
that information. You basically have to be able to present this to the regulators if they, ask that question. So, yeah, that's something we think
The
a
paper trail.
lot about, and also the guardrails, right? So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, if an RA is uncomfortable with the AI making specific stock recommendations, okay, put the
Don't use it.
guardrail in.
Yeah. Or
And then
no.
what's going to happen is if someone forgets, a financial advisor says, hey, which one of the Mag 7 should I recommend to my client? It's going to say, I'm sorry, Dan, but I can't recommend individual stocks to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't have to worry like, oops, like we're going to get in trouble for that. Now, that's not
Yeah.
preventing someone from going and doing that on ChatGPT on their phone,
Sure.
but they know they're breaking a rule at that point, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of beyond our control.
But but even if they do that, even if they get a recommendation from some source, right? And it's very unethical. I hear you, definitely for sure. But if they get a recommendation from some source and then they make the recommendation themselves and they put their name behind it and they take responsibility for it, it may be, it's unethical, but they're accountable, right?
Absolutely. Totally, totally true.
Yeah. So it may not be, it's like, I wouldn't want to work with that advisor who lies about where they get information.
No,
But I'm sure it's
definitely
happening,
not.
it's something to
There are
do.
plenty of people doing research on companies
Yeah.
using AI, right? That's
Oh, they
not the
should.
same as a that's not the same as a recommendation, right? Or on an
Yeah.
industry or whatever. And in investing, think of all the different sources you can connect AI to get, really interesting stuff, SEC Edgar, all kinds of other information to create your macroeconomic
Jeez.
summary, like risk, connect to risk systems and get risk reports. Maybe you can connect to Morningstar and get
Mm-hmm.
competitor information, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It just makes it a lot faster and easier. And if you're connected to a curated source, you're
Yeah.
just going to get better answers, is what's
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's already, it's already been vetted. There's already governance and stuff in place. I kind of want to bring this into the communications world a little bit because, we've been talking, in my mind, everything we've said, I can see every communicator needs to understand a lot of this because they're in, either they're working in regulated industries, or they themselves. If you are at a PR agency, or you're a marketer working at a marketing agency, there are specific guidelines and responsibilities you owe your clients. You have a lot more freedom to play around, maybe, but you have to be transparent. You have to understand the ethics of it all, et cetera, et cetera. But where my mind goes is to crisis. Like, there, we're at an unprecedented age of change, as we say. There's all these cliches we can use to describe it. But even earlier in our conversation, you're talking about the ways that AI can be exploited, and now companies are getting a little bit more. Even highly regulated companies are getting a little more comfortable, or they're building out their own AI, which is their own. And let's be clear: when we say they're building out their own AI, they're building a gate and an interface because they're using OpenAI or Claude or Gemini, right? So like, you're still getting that. Just how are you able to interact with it, and what are the bells and whistles, right? But anyway, they're building internally, and they're more comfortable with many different things, and we see the ability to build workflows and automations, and ultimately some agentic or quasi agentic activity. Adventurous people can do that within a lot of companies. Anyway, with all of this exploitation possibility, and even going back to where we started talking about, that AI doesn't know what it's talking about, and yet, I think crisis communicators, well, every communicator really, but especially crisis communicators, have to become deep experts in all of this. How should they go
Absolutely.
about doing this? I mean, they're not, apart from talking to people like me, but how could they,
Yeah.
how are you seeing that? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. You got to be deeply knowledgeable. And I think there's really kind of three things to think about there. One is privacy and security, right? Like
Always.
if those get violated, you're gonna have a big problem there. So you need a
Mm-hmm.
playbook for that. The other one is, you know, a way for your client to verify that AI generated outputs are accurate, right?
Yep.
We've seen um, one of the large accounting slash consulting companies has become very famous recently for a very bad reason, where it was clear that ChatGPT had generated part of their consulting analysis and it was wrong.
Yeah.
And they literally had to repay the client every penny the client had paid them. Disaster. Now
Yeah.
that might have been like one junior employee dropping in, 3 pages or whatever. Doesn't matter. They still had to repay the client. Now they probably fired that kid, but what a black mark on your reputation. And
Yeah.
also people ask the question, why am I paying them $500,000 for this when I could just go to ChatGPT? Like that's the
Yeah.
last question that these large consulting companies want people to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And also from a legal standpoint, a lot of things, whether it's state law or federal law or Europe or whatever, Now there's a lot of opt-in required. Like if you
Right.
go into a meeting that's being recorded, you may need to opt in. There
Yeah.
may be a big disclaimer that shows up. Uh, Use of AI, if you, for example, in Colorado, if you decline a loan on someone at a bank, the a law that's going to be on the books next year says that that individual needs to be told that AI declined them, and they have the option of saying, "I want a human to review my loan file." Things
Great.
like that,
Yeah.
right? You can obviously opt out on use of your data to be used in AI on lots of social
Hmm.
media platforms. So I think of all the opt-ins and opt-outs there. And if you don't do them correctly and you're missing some state law somewhere, like you're hosed, right?
Yeah.
Like that could end
Oh
up
yeah.
being a class action lawsuit, right, against you.
Yeah. Just I can just imagine the rollouts, the crises that are going to just start popping up more and more. And in some ways, we're going to get inured to them. But the I think the standard crisis playbook is already obsolete because things change too fast. And putting all of the mechanics or the how all AI works, et cetera, all that stuff aside, just the fact that the results of all this is causing a deluge of content, of activity, and bad actors. There's rage farms, bot proliferation, all these wonderful things that we're facing. Even without knowing the first thing about AI, we still have to understand that there's a way to handle this crisis, who needs to be able to speak, who are the experts, et cetera.
Yeah,
But I
I've
think,
heard at this
yeah,
point.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, but I think that the person who's running that crisis comms now has to be the expert too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, like I think that the stats I've seen recently are estimating that about half of content, social media content, is now AI generated,
Oh, I
right?
bet.
And that's went from 20 to 50 very quickly, and it's going to go to from 50% to 80% very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have to ask yourself, as someone in media, you have to understand it's not if, but when
Mm-hmm.
something wrong about your company or client goes on the internet,
Yeah.
right? Or worse, someone deepfakes the CEO saying something that's going to get them in hot water,
Yeah.
right? Like, I hate the following politician or whatever. And then all of
Oh,
a
yeah.
sudden, you're on the NBC nightly news with that
It's
clip,
like,
playing off a TikTok or something. And you're sitting there going like,
yeah.
I never said that, right?
Yeah.
Because at this point, they probably need somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds of a video like this to create a deep fake where they can
Yeah.
say whatever they want and make you say whatever they want. And that's being used to steal money from customers. It's being
Mm-hmm.
used to take over bank accounts. It's being used for all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
crazy purposes. And remember, this is not about individual hackers. These are nation state hackers. We're talking
Right.
Russia, China, North Korea with endless amounts of money to try to do bad things and get
Oh, and they
hard
have been.
currency in the door. Yeah.
Yeah. And the evidence is there that they have been.
Yeah.
So have you ever heard of the firm Cyabra by chance? They
Not
I think
offhand.
they're an Israeli firm, but they are they've been very active in the communications world, like looking at reputation risks. But they're the
Mm-hmm.
ones who identified the percentage of bots that were on Twitter when Elon took over. So that sort of put them on the
Mm,
map. But they're looking at that's what they do. They look at identifying bot traffic, rage farms, all of that
mm-hmm.
stuff, and they're saying exactly what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And the outtake, the takeaway from all of that is there's no way for your company to stop this. There's no way. So you have to have better policies in place. You have to have a reactive like game plan in place, and you have to simulate and game this out constantly. It's like you got to do drills in house to really be able to handle this. The flip side of some of this, I think, is that the deepfakes, especially, might give people who are actually guilty of some of those things, the excuse to say it's a deep fake, and you can't prove otherwise, so it's going to go in both directions. And in some ways the deep fake terror, which is real and which should continue to be real, is I think just going to get more nuanced, as we go along. Yeah.
Well, look, there's companies out there already that claim that they're going to go through the internet and look for negative things about your company, and they're going to try, and they can actually. There's a service right now for famous actors and actresses, which will find deepfakes of them on the internet and notify those companies automatically. Hey, take down this deepfake of me. That's not me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the question is, at what point does a famous CEO need that?
I mean, at what point do they all then suddenly rediscover blockchain and say, what we need is validation on every piece of content that we put out there. And if it doesn't have my blockchain on it, if it's not connected into my thing, into my wallet, it's not, when does that start to happen again? If it happens.
Yeah, that's such a great idea. I think it's all about money, Dan.
Sure.
And when no one watches TikTok because it's all garbage, and they're losing money, then they'll be like, okay, everybody needs a blockchain, needs a private key to be able to upload to blockchain and prove you are who you say you are. That's it.
All the validation, man. Well, look, I mean, I think that there's so much more to uncover here, as always, and we really went deep in some areas that I think that I know communicators need to understand, that marketers need to understand, and I thank you for putting things in quite understandable terms as well. It's remarkable what's happening out there, and you're actually forcing me to maybe soften the edge of my harshness against Copilot a little bit, because I like to kind of poke at Microsoft a little bit. Although, who knows what's going to happen now that Claude and as of the listeners will be getting this several months from now. But I think yesterday, Anthropic and Accenture tied up with on a big venture where Accenture is going to be basically rolling out Claude solutions with clients, and I think it's wonderful because I love Claude, and because I think it's only good for companies to be working with the best products on the market. That said, what happens now to what does Microsoft do in response? What does Google? I mean, Google's fine. I don't think anybody has to worry about Gemini. They're going to just keep doing their arms race, and they have enough of a claw in different environments that they just have to keep doing better. At some point, maybe we'll all be two model shops rather than one. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to shake out.
Yeah. I think I think everyone should be multiple model shops, because we don't know who's going to have the best AI a year from now. We literally have probably 8 model franchises, and for each one of those, anywhere between 3 and 100 models that we look at, test, play around with, do an A/B comparison. And I'm not claiming that every company needs to do that, but they need someone like us to come in and say, hey, by the way, for your CFO doing Excel spreadsheets, you need to use Claude Sonnet 4.5.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's the best right now.
Right.
Oh, by the way, you need something that's connected to your bank's core data. Yeah. The only thing that really works right now is OpenAI, whatever it is. Right.
You have to have multiple things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think people are just starting to figure out that you really need a model agnostic platform, meaning we can even use the bank's private models, right? Not just these public models or open source models or OpenAI. That's where the puck is going, as Wayne Gretzky famously said.
We need to, and it's a bit like the puck is going, but it's getting faster and faster. And I think we're moving into 4D hockey, and there's 35 pucks on the ice, and good luck with all that. Well, listen, Alec, I can't tell you how thankful I am for you coming on the show, and for us having this back and forth. Like, I was on your show, you're on my, like, what a great way to to really share knowledge, build relationships, etc. So thank you so much for coming on. Folks, everybody out there, you can find Alec Crawford. And again, harken back to the beginning of the show. You're looking for the Alec Crawford who is at artificial intelligence risk, not the Alec Crawford who is all about sustainability. Although this Alec Crawford is concerned with sustainability in a different way. However, Alec Crawford, CEO of Artificial Intelligence Risk, look him up on LinkedIn, AICrisk.com. That's his business. That's AICrisk.com. And then look for the AI Risk Reward podcast. Anywhere you get podcasts, look for it on YouTube, and the AI Risk Reward Substack. Are you still calling that the Stay blog?
Yeah, it's part of the same. Yeah, it's part of that same thing. It's the same section basically. So basically, I'm writing under the AI Risk Reward banner
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I really wish I could write more often. I'm
too.
probably writing like once a month now. Love to get that to weekly, but again, I'm creating original stuff. It's not what people call AI slop, right?
Never.
If you read my stuff, I wrote it. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's not coming from AI.
Well, that's great. I'm using AI to help me write, or to help me, let's call it help me gather thoughts. But the thinking and the core writing is mine, and I feel the same way. But I don't mind saying I'm using AI. Let people know. I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as I let people know, I'm not pretending. It's all about is it good quality or not? Like, does it move people the way I want it to move people? If it does, then it's fine. If it doesn't, and it's AI slop, then that's on me. But man, any last words, Alec, before we sign off?
Yeah, no. So another exciting piece of news.
Yeah, please.
Which is Macmillan has accepted my book proposal.
Oh,
so
terrific!
Next year, I'm publishing. Working title, but risk management in the AI era. So that'll be coming out next year from Macmillan.
Congratulations!
So
that is big.
It's about half written. I'm interviewing a bunch of people as part of the book. It's super exciting. If you're a famous AI person, or maybe you're a famous marketing person who knows about AI, yeah, definitely looking to interview people and incorporate their views into the book. So super exciting.
Oh, okay. Well, let's put a pin in that, because I know some relatively famous people in the AI world, and
cool.
And it would be great to connect you. So everybody out there, look up, go connect with Alec, read his Substack. We communicators, often we hear the word risk and we're like, snooze fest. That means legal. It means, oh gosh, we got to talk to the accountants again. That is not what we're talking about here. There are so many layers to this. You need to understand it if you want to communicate properly for your company. So please, again, AI Risk Reward, the AI Risk Reward podcast and the Substack, and please do check out Alec here on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Alec, for coming on, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you, Dan.